Good afternoon, and thank you for joining another Livelihood conversation. I'm Cynthia Abbott, and today we're going to be discussing the topic of emotional intelligence and why that can oftentimes be a career black box. And we're going to talk to you about some highs, some lows, and methods and techniques that we, myself and Mike and Harold, have used to navigate this space because it can be very gray. So I'm thrilled to introduce Mike and Harold. Gentlemen, welcome, and looking forward to kicking off this conversation.
Great to be with you.
Same here. Hi, Cynthia, Mike.
Hi, Harold. So I know that we're jumping right in, and we were chatting about this a little bit offline. And so just to give our viewers kind of a high level, we go through and we talk about a topic, an idea, a conversation. So our conversation this week is going to be on the topic of emotional intelligence. And Mike, I'm really interested to get your perspective on how you've coached clients and really taken them from the space of responding versus reacting in situations. How do you respond to situations at work?
What that comment about responding versus reacting is the core. Honestly, it's going to be the core of your success in your career. And just one top level before we dive in, your career success is more contingent upon how you communicate and how you relate to other people than it does your technical competence. Period. End of story. Study after study shows that's the path to career success is more driven by your relationships than your technical or your work competence. So be very aware of that. And that's really hard if that's not a skill set for you or a strength. But one area is the trigger point. And you, as coaches, what we really focus on is driving home a point. The only controllable element in a tough situation is how you respond to it. You cannot, whatever's coming at you, whatever a person is saying, however they're reacting, not controllable. The way you respond to it, that is your area. That is your area of control. And learning how to control that is a gift that I wish I had started when I was 12. And I would argue that I've gotten a lot better at it. And I know a lot of coaches will tell you and will be very open about that this is the continual growth area.
Agreed. From my own experience, agreed. We think that it's going to be the technical path, that being the expert is going to lead us somewhere, but really it's how you convince, cajole, influence, and understand people. And Harold, when you think about the teams you've led, the business deals you've been a part of, and even in your own personal life, right? How have you convinced and guided others, in this responding versus reacting space?
I think Mike answered the question. I think that's the common denominator of a lot of this. It's you listen more than you talk. You understand the situation and you position yourself strategically and functionally to add value, not detract or distract. And that's a challenge sometimes. You're not what you do at work, you are at work. So you don't have to bring your entire self to it. You have to bring your professional functional self. I'm not going to respond the way I would respond at a football game or at home if I'm burning something. Instead, I have a professional approach. I know there's going to be pressures, especially in the middle management role, even at the C level. You have your stockholders, your board of trustees, you have leaders who are pressing you to meet milestones. And you have to inform those that work with or for you to meet those goals and objectives in a timely fashion, under budget and on time. So yours as a leader is to be very consistent, motivating all the way, being realistic about things, and just trying to keep everything normal. The last thing you want is just a big drama event at work every single day. That just wears me out.
And, I think, Harold, that was really like the framing you did there. And, Cynthia, in your world, you're dealing with people's paycheck. and
Yes.
you're dealing with the way they're going to pay their rent or their mortgage. How have you dealt with people who make you feel uncomfortable, or people that you witness making other people feel uncomfortable?
I think early in my career, I probably absorbed that feeling and felt that level of discomfort. And really, when I think about that level of discomfort, it comes, in the form of, to the point Harold made, having those kind of pressed upon deadlines, and we've got to get this done and what have you. And at this point in my career, in my life, I'm a lot more upfront about what it'll take to get things done and managing those expectations. And I find I feel less uncomfortable now and less pressed upon now, saying, wait a minute, yes, you have this ask and I want to get that for you, but you have 5 other asks in the queue as well.
So what triggered the transition from I'm absorbing it, I'm taking the shot. I mean, this person's uncomfortable and I'm just, to I'm not taking the shot anymore, and I'm participating in this, and I'm trying to redirect, but I still and be effective. What were the triggers to change?
Well, I did a lot of reading and research, and it was talking about how really great leaders communicate with what they need. And that just sitting there kind of in that space and absorbing the shot, like you're essentially just not communicating.
Absolutely.
And this other person may not realize how they're coming across, right? And I think too, you kind of sit in this space in your career where you don't want to seem like you don't know. But the longer I've done this, the more I've gotten into the space of saying, let me get back to you. Let me get all of my information. Right? This kind of, we don't have to be, as you say, Mike, in that burst, right? We don't have to be in that burst of yes or no. Let me process what you're saying to me and then respond.
So it sounds like, to replay it, and Harold, your thoughts on this would be great, is you're no longer sitting in fear of going, okay, how do I respond to this? How do I, and if I don't look competent, at least in my head, that I'm making this worse, or this person's going to think even worse of me. They're throwing a tantrum, and if I don't either out tantrum them or just absorb all of it, it sounds like it really came from being okay with not being perfect,
And
being
that has
okay
been
with
a
the process.
long process in that space, because it's taken quite a number of years, but I'm more comfortable now saying, I don't know, or let me dig into this.
Yeah.
Right? Because what you also have to replay in your mind is that the person asking the question, they don't know either.
Or they think they know, but they really don't know.
And I've also dealt with people that will try and ask a litany of questions to try and put work off on someone else, and or to seem more intelligent. And that every ask, you don't need to write down like a secretary.
The fun part is, every time you're speaking, Harold's smile was getting bigger.
Yes.
And I couldn't tell if it was a smile of pain or
yes, wince, but it's also one of experience, because you've been in those meetings where someone is, doing the old, let's throw everything up and then I'll sneak out while the confusion is being sorted out, because they may not be prepared, or they may be intimidated, or, they just don't know. And this is the way of dealing with it.
But you're going right to an important topic. There's 2 sides to this. So Harold, what's worked for you in terms of expressing your feelings at work? And let me add another question then. But how do you make sure that doesn't get in the way, with getting the task done, or getting the project?
And those are all great questions. Self-awareness and self-regulation is really important in engaging and exchanging. I can be super excited about a project, or super excited about the progress we're making as a team or as an individual, but kind of have to keep that in check, because everybody's not feeling your fun. Oh yeah, we got this because I spent the entire weekend here. Where were you, pal? Right? So being able to maintain some balance of that, but emotions aren't something I really deal with well, and it comes off a little bit robotic from time to time. So I really have to be short, quick, to the point, understanding that's a weak point, right? There are others in the group who do that better. I support them in their ability to communicate it, just giving you my weakness. I don't do that stuff at all. However, I understand the value of it. And I understand that as a director, as a VP, there needs to be some engagement with everyone so that they can see that you're genuinely concerned, or that you're excited, or that you're committed. And so at a minimum, we can share that motivation. We can demonstrate empathy. We can practice our social skills so that they understand, okay, he's there, he's just a little clunky at it. He doesn't dance well, but he knows the music, right? So that's one of the ways that we approach it.
Thanks for the dancing analogy that I winched at when you said that. I think it's interesting where just a comment where both of you went was this didn't start externally. In other words, it didn't start with, I learned how to tell them to shut the hell up. It started with, how am I responding to it? Did you notice that? And Harold, in your case, you're going, okay, this is not something that's intrinsic in me.
Right.
And most of your career has been driven by the high intelligence you have, the work ethic you have. And when somebody's not at that level and somebody's getting pretty emotional, okay, not my strong point, but I have enough tools that I know how to not let this spiral, and I respect it. So Cynthia, kind of the same with you. It's like, how did we build internal tools to do this?
I think for me, it was just a level of, I was always feeling constantly exhausted and burned out.
Yeah.
And my personality and my imposter syndrome is that I always start from a space of like, I know that I'm going to be a failure in some capacity. Mm-hmm. So like, I always think my work is just subpar. Right. So then any nick in that, any ding in that is just more reinforcement of the imposter syndrome, sphere. And so I think, and I also think part of it too is age, that like once you cross over into your 30s, especially your mid 30s, you're like, how much do I really care what you think of me?
Remember that age? That was fun.
Right? Like all of a sudden, like, like in your 20s, like you're going to please everyone. And then in your 30s, you're kind of like,
do I need to?
I mean, like, how upset is upset, right? Like,
but the interesting thing when you go there is, how do we also recognize that we might be working with somebody who's not developed these skills, does not have that, has done that kind of inner work around that? And, I think one of the key questions is, how do you show empathy for somebody who's not really fun to be empathetic with, or to create that? And I think that's, that's one of the things in coaching I run into a lot. Is like, okay, my boss is a total ass, and what do I do about it? Or if I'm talking to a leader, I've got this team member that she's brilliant, but you put her in a room with a customer and we're like, we're white knuckling under the table, but she's brilliant. People that do not have well-developed emotional intelligence still can add value in an organization.
Right.
But I think that's the art of leadership is, do you try to grow them? I'm putting this out as an open question. Do you try to grow them? Do you try to compensate? How do you guys approach that?
As a leader, when I've had people display it to me, what I work on personally is responding less. Because some people will engage in an attempt to try and get a response.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And so
they want you to come down to their level.
Right. And so I'll say, okay, is this really the topic? And I usually find that someone will pause at that. And I'll say, is this really what we want to discuss? And then usually there's more pause. And I'll say, okay, why don't we take a beat and regroup? And typically I find that behavior from a leader follower relationship tends to subside, because people realize, wait a minute, I need to take a big gulp of my Slurpee here and calm down. Right? Like I'm not, at the Little League potluck, like this is work.
Yeah.
I read a book about a year ago by John C. Maxwell called How to Lead When Your Boss Can't or Won't.
Mhm.
And really, it was a really good book because you think you're reading about how you're going to lead your boss, and it's all about you.
Yeah.
And how you've got to lead you and how you've got to interact. And in dealing with the personalities I've dealt with, you know, you can't focus on them, and you can't try to seek approval from them. It has to be, here's what I'm doing, here's what I've done, communication. Okay, what's the feedback? Okay, that's feedback. Okay, done. And then if the feedback tries to loop into some type of, you know, naysaying and it's not direct feedback, it's just an attempt to malign, my response is, this isn't feedback and you know it.
The only thing I would debate you there is they may not know it. Everything, and you know, can I throw some models on the table just because
Please.
This is one communication and dealing with conflict and debate is probably the biggest part of coaching that we work on. At any point in your career, if you don't do this well, you will have a crash landing in some manner. And that's why there's two programs that I use a lot. I'm certified in one. One is called nonviolent communication, which I dislike the name a lot. But it's a really good exploration tool. It's also free. It's online. Nonviolent communication. The other one is Crucial Conversations. And Crucial Conversations, great book, very simple. But the whole idea is, how do you set the stage and the process to have that uncomfortable conversation? Because really what we're dealing with here is when there is a collision, when there is a lack of listening, there needs to be a process and a method to start to get those things closer or a little bit more aligned. And, you know, nonviolent, crucial, whatever the case is, you've got to have a method to do this. And a lot of these methods come at it, the approach this way. And you were going a lot there, Cynthia, which was to go, okay, how do I understand them? But at the same time, how do I state my stuff clearly enough that at least I'm pretty sure they understand me? And then once we're getting closer to being aligned, okay, now we start going at the heart of what's our debate here? And then breaking those out into elements we can work on. So you're going from this, I'm really upset, I'm really angry, to, okay, let's start talking and let's set a safety zone. Let's start, you know, clearing the smoke away. What are the core issues here? And that's a methodology to get to more emotional intelligence.
That's cool.
It's what you do with it after you've had these dialogues, and learning to listen a little bit better, learning to know your hot buttons. I'm going to ask this question, Harold, what are your hot buttons today? Ooh. And I want you guys to ask me back.
Ooh, hot buttons. Can I first say that I really appreciate your models?
Yeah, thank you.
That makes sense. And also let me share that my past experience, similar to Cynthia's, is when I have people in my department that were not getting it, were not being focused on what they need to be focused on, I put them in pairs and teams. And usually one person expressed emotional intelligence or some facets of it better than the other. They may not be junior, they just may not be as emotionally evolved as the other.
Got it.
And over time, they began to work better together and could respond more effectively in difficult situations. So to answer your question, though, I think my hot buttons are being unprepared, or you overrate yourself in the way you present yourself. You overcook it. And that confidence oftentimes means, again, you're not prepared, but you want to buffalo them with all the BS to scare people off and go to the next person.
Right.
So in those types of environments where EI is so important, be real. Represent the situation as it truly is, because we're making decisions based off of your information. I don't need to filter through it to find out what the real truth is. And part of that is being intelligent enough emotionally and politically to understand that you're building colleagues, camaraderie. You're building a reputation among your peers, and you want to be there and trusted. You don't want to be a big fluffy shirt where there's nothing there. Okay, let's let Harold talk. Okay, next, Cynthia, what do you really have to share, right? So that would be my hot button.
So fair to say, you know your hot button. You know that if somebody starts with that kind of behavior, it can be a trigger for you.
Yep.
But it also sounds like, okay, when I'm starting to feel it, when I'm starting to see it, instead of letting, the lizard brain kick in, I'm going to choose to do something else.
I'm not to that chapter yet, but yeah, that would be the logical thing to do. Right now, I'm doing everything I can to keep that poker face on. 5 more minutes. 5 more. I don't know what he says, what she said, but to your point, if I am using my emotional intelligence as best I can, I am thinking of an alternative to be a little bit more in the space, in time, at the moment, versus removing myself from that space.
Love it.
How about, I'm dying to hear.
Yeah, what are yours?
Your buttons
Disrespect.
and how you respond, and I need something.
No, I'm really fortunate that I knew a lot of them. The one I say this because this does come up in my practice and also in my work. It's disrespect. If you show disrespect, particularly if it was somebody that worked for me, somebody that was on my team, I had issues. I'm not a small human being. And I'm well aware that I have the right kind of voice, that I've got the body type and the voice that I can make a very significant impact if I want to. And for a while, notice my voice is raising. For a while, I was I did get emotional about that, but I realized, that's something that I can, if I'm aware of it, I'll just use it. And so that's really, I'm aware of disrespect. When somebody I've had a lot of women work for me. And again, I came out of healthcare, so I'm very cognizant of women leadership. And then going into tech where there weren't a lot of women leaders, it's always been something I've been very cognizant of. And the treatment of women has always been something that is foremost in my mind, because so many of the leaders I worked with did not have good emotional intelligence. There is a joke in Silicon Valley that is not a joke. What do you call somebody with severe Asperger's in Silicon Valley? The answer, CEO. And it's true. People do well in Silicon Valley because they're highly intelligent, right? Not necessarily because they have great people skills. There's a lot of work going on in that, and positive work around finding more leaders that are like that and embedding them in the organizations early. But I'm aware of my issues with disrespect. I will let people know clearly and quickly, but I know that I have to take that moment, that sort of deep breath, to go, okay, do not open the window with them standing next to it. Make sure that and how do I talk meaningfully at that moment? Because I have to make sure that they understand I am upset, but I want to make sure that the message isn't the confrontational upset. It's the, you've done something that really, really ticked me off. I believe you've hurt another person, particularly somebody that works for me or that that is someone I care about, or in the organization. You need to stop. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Oh yeah.
Makes sense. And I appreciate the thought as you work through that. Mine is still a work in action. One quick question though. There are a couple of situations where someone who has been an individual contributor in a small firm, who is small fish, small firm, or even medium-sized fish, who is now given the opportunity to work in a larger organization where your emotional intelligence has to expand to fill that role. So if you're smart, you're smart. But emotional intelligence is an engaging type of thing, at least in my experience, being self-aware and having empathy. You have a roster of a much larger platform than the 10 people in your group. Any experiences with people who you've worked with or worked for who've had transition problems moving from one to the other?
How much time do we have? I mean, I'll put it to you this way: that for a period of my career towards sort of the latter part before I really went into coaching full time, I was brought into startups with two missions. Number one is, build a culture so we can grow it, build our hiring methodology, coach our leadership. And it was I was a 2-for-1 special. The issue is, how comfortable are people making this change? And unfortunately, so often the reason that they're making the change is they screwed up. I have been brought into a number of startups where, I mean, I've got 4 or 5 of these emails where, hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm head of people at this company, heard about you. I've got these 2 really interesting leaders who are struggling. And when you start to go in and talk with the leaders, you find out that their emotional intelligence is quite low. One leader, I had to explain how to do small talk. And to the point where I had to talk to him about how you engage in a simple dialogue with somebody, and finally explain the safest dialogue in the world is talk about food. He didn't know that. He was a sales leader, by the way.
So there's that.
And this is a case where, I'm not going to diagnose him. Is it Asperger's? Is it this? Is it that? Is it? And I actually think in his case it was stress, severe stress that he was under. But that's the whole point. Is, did he want to grow? He did, actually, and that's the encouraging thing. You can be at any level, and I think we all know this. And Cynthia, I mean, this is probably, most of your career. We can be at any level in a skill, but if we want to grow, we can grow. If we don't want to grow, we're not going anywhere.
It's true.
Yep.
I'm pontificating on this. Sorry about it. This is a big topic for me.
No, I think too, like, the stress you feel as a leader, once you become a leader, there's never really a point where there's not some type of pressure. And you have to decide how much you're going to let that valve either run your day or you're going to run it. Right. And also I think too, like, being open about the type of leader you are. Right. I am a leave it all on the field kind of leader. Right. So if you want to show up and you're thinking you're just maybe like sort of going to put one shoe on and like maybe run a play or 2 if you sort of have to, probably not the leader for you. Probably not the team for you. Right? We're going to play hard. We're going to support each other. We're going to make goals. We're going to make these things happen. And if that's not where you're at, that's fine. I'll help you find where you are at. Maybe you're interested in being that, but you've never been shown that. I can do that too. But I think it's important to also level set with people what they're looking at, what they're going to get, right? And I'll tell my teams, I will always support you. I will always support you. Here's what we're looking at. Because as the career that I'm in kind of twists and turns and companies have growing expectations now of what can be delivered, the kind of steady state, we're going to show up, punch a clock, and do this 100 times over is really dissipating.
It's gone. But notice what both of you did, and I think this is striking. Well, all 3 of us did. We know our hot buttons. We know those situations that are going to trigger the throw the water bottle, or whatever that emotional response is. And I think what makes both of you good leaders and me continue to try to be a good leader is the idea of, okay, I can interrupt this. Yeah, Harold, you were saying it. I can 5 minutes, 2 minutes. Okay, I can interrupt this enough. And there's a real theory about interruption, breaking a chain, breaking a process that's a muscle building exercise. If you get that, what can be 1 minute can be 5, can be, okay, when it hits me, it won't hit me anymore. It won't do any damage and I can blow it off.
Right.
And I think that's the path of growth that we're talking about here.
Right.
That's how emotional intelligence shows up, is when you recognize I can listen to them, I can take the flack, that incoming flack, but it doesn't deter me from truly listening.
True.
Well, and I used to take questions as someone was questioning me. People having questions is not a question of your competency.
They just don't know.
They don't know. And, I also think too, like just being honest, and I'll say to my partners, I've looked at this so many times, right? Like, it's like when you plug an air freshener in your house and like all your clothes smell like sunflower sunrise, and the car smells that way. And like someone else walks in and they like almost pass out because it's so overwhelming. And you're like, okay. But when you're so intense in something, it's hard for you then to deject that reality and, figure out, well, wait a minute, what is it you're asking me? Because it's part of my identity that I've been this close to it. And it's like, no, let me hear what you're saying. Let me say it back to you. And I'll say to people, I want to make sure I'm understanding what you're asking me, right? Let's clarify. And then, okay, maybe I've got an answer here, but I need to find out what part 2 is. Okay, that's fine. Because if someone's not going to either allow you the opportunity to answer or to find out information, they're not really interested in an answer to the question anyway.
I'm struck by how all 3 of us gave our methods. Did you notice that? Each of us had, I know my hot button, I have a tool chest, imperfect as it may be, to know when X occurs, pull this tool out of the tool chest. This is how I'm going to be there, so that my response is helpful versus my response is it's going to escalate it.
Right.
And I wish there was a way to do that in 5 minutes or less, and as opposed to the several decades of experience we've all had to gain.
But I'm happy to have it now. Thank you very much.
Yes, agreed. Agreed. There's always the time to learn it, right?
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for this fantastic conversation. I think we're all really enjoying, livelihood and the topics that we're diving into. They're very real, and they're things that we're all dealing with on a regular basis. To our viewers, if you're interested in reaching out, livelihoodproject4@gmail.com. That's our email address. You can also connect with each of us on LinkedIn. Our videos are on social media, Facebook and YouTube. And if you have any questions or you have any suggestions for additional content, please feel free to let us know. And on that, I think we'll bid farewell. Anything you'd like to add, guys? Any closing remarks?
No, this was incredibly helpful, and I'm so proud to be part of this.
Same here. This is fun. See you next week.
Have a great night.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.